Picture two scenes. In the first, a baby is born in the UK in the year 2049, and there's a real chance that child will see their 100th birthday. In the second, an artist steps off stage after playing a massive set, ears ringing, adrenaline still high, and suddenly it's just a quiet hotel room and the strange emptiness that follows. And in a third scene, a traveler opens a hotel room service menu and, instead of the usual heavy comfort food, sees a lineup built around recovery and energy. These sound like totally different worlds, right? Demographics, touring life, hotel wellness.
But they're all connected by the same underlying story. We're building lives that last longer, and we're scrambling to redesign everything around that fact.
And that redesign touches money, bodies, and even business models. Because living longer sounds like a victory. Medicine advances, better awareness, healthier choices, but it also brings a very practical question. If we add years, how do we pay for them? How do we stay well through them? And who shows up to sell us the tools and the shortcuts along the way? Let's start with the big national-level reality, public finances and retirement. The warning coming from analysts is pretty blunt. If life expectancy keeps rising, the UK is going to feel it in everything from pension costs to policy-making priorities. The basic math is unavoidable. More people living longer means more years drawing retirement income. Not just a couple extra birthdays. Potentially decades.
Decades is the key word. There's a psychological gap here. A lot of people still plan like retirement is a short chapter, like it's this neat little glide path after work. But the conversation now is more like, what if retirement is its own entire adult life? Right. And that brings us to the risk everyone keeps pointing at, underestimating. If you assume you'll need income support for, say, 10 or 15 years, but you end up needing it for 25 or 30, you can run into the nightmare scenario, running out of money late in life when it's hardest to adapt. One of the clearest signals comes from the UK's Office for National Statistics, which tracks both past and projected life expectancy. Their newest life tables basically say the odds of reaching very old age are rising, especially for those born in the coming decades.
Here's what that looks like in plain terms. For children born in 2049, the projections suggest roughly about a quarter of girls could live to at least 100. For boys, it's closer to about 1 in 5. Compare that with kids born in 2024, where the projections are lower, still notable, but not as high. And it's not just about getting to 100. Average life expectancy at birth is also expected to climb. The projection puts girls born in 2049 at just over 92 years on average, and boys close to 90. That's a couple of extra years compared with babies born in 2024. A couple years sounds small until you multiply it across a population and across retirement systems.
So retirement isn't the last lap. It's an entirely new season. And that puts pressure on two sides at once. Individuals need bigger personal savings, and the state faces higher costs to support retirement benefits.
And you can hear the urgency in what retirement analysts are saying. The essence is, if people increasingly spend decades in retirement, planning becomes non-negotiable, not vague planning. Actual numbers, actual timelines, actual contingency thinking. Okay, so that's the macro view. But what does it feel like at the human level? Let's switch to a completely different environment. The music industry. Because the emotional and physical reality of longevity isn't just about pensions, it's also about how you take care of yourself when your life rhythm is extreme. There's this artist, Nunez, who talked about how your routine, the way you train, how you treat your body, even your mental health, directly affects how you show up day after day. And if you've ever toured or even just worked intense cycles, you know what he means. The highs are high, and the lows can be weirdly low.
He described the industry as running on extremes. One night you're in front of thousands, everything is loud and bright and amplified. Then the very next moment you're alone, maybe in a bus, maybe in a room, and you're trying to come down from all that energy.
That post-show drop, he called it intense. And I think a lot of people relate to that even outside music. Big presentation at work, big event, major deadline, then suddenly, quiet. The body is still revving.
What I found interesting is he didn't pitch it like he'd found a magical way to erase that crash. He's basically saying it doesn't fully go away, so he manages it with small, repeatable habits, things that help him recover instead of pretending he can stay in performance mode forever. One tool he mentioned was magnesium as part of his nighttime routine, something to help his system settle. Not framed as some miracle, more like a practical signal to the body. We're done for today. It's time to downshift.
And then there's the mindset piece. He leans hard on controlling what he can control and not getting glued to the parts he can't, which sounds like a cliche until you hear it in context, like the rollout of a collaboration that stretches on for months.
He talked about working on a record with Diplo, and how the release timeline was uncertain enough that at some points he genuinely wondered if it would ever come out. If you've never been in that kind of waiting game, it can eat your brain. Your imagination fills the silence with worst-case scenarios.
So he made a deliberate choice. Keep expectations low. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want to be emotionally tossed around by delays or changes. That's a protective strategy. It keeps the nervous system from living on a cliff edge.
And it worked. When things finally moved forward, he could meet that moment without the whiplash. That's a kind of longevity skill too. Emotional durability. Not just living longer, but staying functional and steady over time.
He also brought up something that matters in any noisy environment: choosing your inner circle. When everyone has an opinion, you can drown in advice. His approach is to keep a small group whose feedback actually counts, because otherwise you start living by committee. Now let's widen the lens again. Because while individuals are trying to build resilience and routines, entire industries are reorganizing around the longevity theme. Hotels are doing it, clinics are doing it. Even mortgage and retirement planning conversations are starting to treat how long you might live as the central variable. Take Mayborn, for example, the hotel group building out this concept called Seren. They're rolling out a health-focused menu designed around longevity and well-being. And not in a here's a sad salad way. The framework is more functional. Energy, recovery, digestion, balance. They brought in a nutritionist and functional medicine practitioner, Rose Ferguson, who helped develop the menu with their culinary team. The idea is to make eating well while traveling feel less like work. You're jet-lagged, you're in meetings, you're off your routine, so the menu tries to do some of the decision-making for you. And the food itself is built around whole ingredients, lots of color, and anti-inflammatory themes. Juices and smoothies featuring things like fennel, apple, cucumber, celery, kale, ginger, beetroot, the kind of lineup that signals we're aiming for nourishment, not just taste. Breakfast options include the familiar but optimized stuff: granola, poached eggs with avocado and greens, a green shakshuka, a hemp bowl. And then for mains, you start seeing bowls, broths, and lean proteins. Noodle broths with tofu and spinach, a charred cauliflower Buddha bowl with things like quinoa and edamame, grilled chicken with roasted squash and fennel, trout with buckwheat noodles and cucumber, sirloin with watercress and a miso dressing, cod with miso ginger flavors alongside greens and black rice. What I hear underneath that is demand. They're not doing this out of charity. Their wellness leads are saying guests want healthier options, whether they're recovering from a flight, trying to start the day steady, refueling after a workout, or just seeking something that doesn't derail them during an otherwise indulgent holiday.
And they're planning to roll it out across the group in 2026 and beyond. So again, longevity isn't a niche. It's becoming a standard expectation in places where it used to be an afterthought.
Which brings us to the business side of longevity in its most direct form. Clinics, not hospitals, not conventional primary care. We're talking about a new category of longevity-focused wellness clinics, often selling therapies like hormones, peptides, and a whole menu of interventions aimed at helping people feel better, perform better, and theoretically age better.
A key reason this market is exploding is simple. People keep spending on wellness, even when money gets tight. Surveys suggest wellness is one of the areas consumers say they're least likely to cut back on. That's huge, because it makes longevity not just a health trend, but a stable business strategy.
One of the fast-scaling players is Forever Young, which is structuring anti-aging and wellness as a franchise model. They've got a wide range of services, over 100 modalities, and that includes things like GLP-1 medications, hormone optimization, peptides, plus the classic aesthetic offerings like Botox and injectables.
They've grown to more than 70 locations, and they're pushing past 80 this year, with dozens more in the pipeline across multiple markets. And what's notable is that their franchise owners don't necessarily need a medical background. Clinical services are delivered by licensed providers, while the business model is designed for scale.
And they're leaning into membership. That's not an accident. Membership models keep people engaged over time, which fits the longevity narrative. This isn't a one-off purchase, it's ongoing upkeep as you age. Zoom out and you see the category itself forming. Reports suggest there are already hundreds of longevity clinics worldwide, more than 700 by one recent tally, and with demand like this, that number probably grows. GLP-1s are part of what normalized this shift, not just because of weight loss, but because they made more consumers comfortable with the idea of clinical style interventions as part of wellness. Once people cross that psychological threshold, the next question becomes, okay, what else is available?
And that what else shows up quickly. Laser Away, known as an aesthetic dermatology chain, expanded into wellness injections like glutathione, B12, and NAND Plus. Not a franchise, but a big network, over 200 clinics, still growing and celebrating longevity in their own business history. Then you've got Serotonin Centers, founded by someone with deep roots in fitness franchising. They're signing development deals in major metros. And they've also launched a model that installs longevity suites inside gyms, basically turning unused space into a performance and recovery corner. Their service list reads like a futuristic wellness catalog: hormone optimization, GLP-1 and GIP protocols, peptides, NAD plus optimization, IV therapy, red light, hyperbaric oxygen, and the pitch is clear. Early movers can become full-spectrum destinations: fitness, recovery, longevity, all in one place. Next Health is another major name aiming big, talking about expanding to a huge number of locations. Their menu includes things like therapeutic plasma exchange and ozone therapy, and they've been acquiring brands to accelerate growth.
And then there's Humanot Health, connected to the Restore Hyperwellness founder, scaling into hormone optimization, hyperbaric oxygen, cryotherapy, biomarker testing, DEXA scans, regenerative medicine. The list goes on. If you're listening and thinking, this sounds like spa services mixed with clinical medicine, you're not wrong. That's exactly the blend people are buying, which raises the tension at the heart of this whole story. We are living longer. People want to feel better while they do it. Businesses are racing to meet that demand. But the line between evidence-based care, personalized optimization, consumer hype, and expensive experimentation can get blurry. And while all of that is happening, while the wellness economy builds new storefronts, another arena is shifting under our feet: housing, debt, and retirement strategy. Because if you ask most people what their biggest asset is, it's not their pension, it's their home. Let's bring in the week's market backdrop, because it shapes what people can do with their housing wealth. Mortgage rates rose again, hitting their highest point in about 6 weeks, around the mid-6% range for top-tier 30-year loans. Inflation reports ran hotter than expected. Markets watched oil prices and geopolitical tensions, and even when bonds stabilized later, the overall mood stayed cautious. And the housing market itself isn't delivering the spring surge some expected. Even big players reported weaker volume. Refinance activity cooled too, down to a smaller slice of total mortgage locks. And in servicing, complex workflows like bankruptcies are still messy, still compliance-heavy, and still often dependent on manual workarounds. So now put that into the retirement frame. Retirement is getting longer, costs are rising, and the traditional income sources can feel uncertain, which is why home equity is increasingly becoming central to how people plan to fund later life. And it's not a small pool of money. Older Americans, especially those 70 and above, hold an enormous amount of housing wealth. Figures around $13 trillion get cited. But here's the twist. Equity on paper doesn't always convert cleanly into usable retirement funds.
Because selling a home is not like selling a stock. Research suggests older homeowners often get lower sale prices than younger sellers, even when the homes are broadly comparable. Something like several percentage points less in some cases. Why? Deferred maintenance, outdated presentation, physical limitations, and sometimes pure urgency.
And urgency changes everything. If someone is selling because of a health event or a sudden need to relocate, or they're exhausted by upkeep, they may accept a lower offer just to get it done. They're buying certainty and simplicity, even if it costs them, which makes the message to retirees and to the professionals advising them pretty clear. Don't wait for the pressure point. If you only think about housing wealth when you're forced into a quick sale or a crisis, your options shrink.
That's where the reverse mortgage and broader retirement planning conversation is evolving. It used to be framed as, look at all this record equity. Now it's becoming, how do we use housing wealth deliberately? Timing, strategy, preservation, before life narrows the choices. And you can feel the responsibility there. If someone is navigating inflation, higher living costs, changing family dynamics, and uncertainty around retirement income, then home equity becomes less like a bonus and more like a core part of the plan. So if we stitch the whole episode together, what do we have? We have longer lifespans changing national budgets and personal savings needs. We have individuals like Nunez trying to build routines and mental guardrails to survive the emotional extremes of modern work. We have hotels building wellness into a travel experience because guests demand it.
We have franchise clinics scaling longevity therapies because consumers are willing to pay to feel better and age differently. And we have housing wealth turning into a strategic retirement tool, not just a number on Zillow.
The resolution isn't a neat answer like, here's the one thing to do. It's a reframing. Living longer means the old defaults don't work. Retirement planning can't be shallow, recovery can't be accidental, health choices can't be an afterthought, and financial decisions, especially around housing, can't wait for an emergency. And maybe the biggest question for listeners is this: if you really might have decades ahead in later life, what does planning mean to you right now? Is it savings? Is it home strategy? Is it building routines that keep you stable? Is it being careful about who you let influence your choices?
Because longevity isn't just about adding years to life, it's about building systems, personal and societal, that can hold those years. And that story is unfolding everywhere, in government projections, in wellness menus, in clinics on street corners, and in the quiet decisions people make about money, health, and home. Please subscribe at IamHealthyMoney.com. It would mean so much more than you know. I will continue to bring you fascinating subjects with all the research so you don't have to do it all alone. We will learn together, and then wait until the end of each video for a sneak peek into the next research project. Life has its ups and downs, but you're not alone.
From 10 to 110, we're in this together, right here, right now.
We love ya.